In spite of its many weaknesses, I love the church. I believe it's God's gift to us. I would never want to be without the church. Why would I say that? Well, the church meets some of my basic, deepest needs. The need to belong. I want to be part of something larger than myself, something that's significant, and I see that in the church. Today we begin unit number 2, Begin Anew to Belong. We want to take a look at the church. What is the church? What is the nature of the church? We want to take a look at its purposes and its visions, and take another look at the church in times of the emerging church, or in the context of the emerging church. Today we're fortunate to have Stuart Murray with us by Skype. Stuart has been a church planter, still is a church planter in terms of consulting with other church planters. He's a leader of people who are working in the emerging church. Stuart lives in Bristol, England. His wife is a Baptist pastor. He was the chair of the Anabaptist Network and continues with that work. Stuart, you're working with the emerging church. What would you say, how would you describe the church in the post-Christian world? What words would you use?
How would I describe the church? I think I would be drawn particularly to the language of community as the foundation for any understanding of church. At its simplest, I think the church is simply a community of those who follow Jesus. And that begs all kinds of questions about location, size, structure, institutional reality. And I think one of the concerns that I bring as I look at church planting in a post-Christian world is the danger of overcomplicating, of bringing all kinds of things into the picture that don't need to be there. So I would go for a very simple, almost minimalist understanding of church. It's simply a community of those who follow Jesus and want to follow him faithfully.
I like that. Could you say a little bit more about that? Think about the person on the street. What does the church have to offer? If a person would ask me, why should I come to your church? Well, what should I say?
I think the language of coming to church or going to church is itself in some ways a hangover from the Christendom era. That seems to me to imply there is a particular place at a particular time where certain things happen. It seems to imply that the church is at the centre of culture and is issuing invitations to those who it feels really ought to join them for these events on these particular occasions. I think we've got to go beyond that. I think we need to reimagine the church no longer as an institution at the centre handing out invitations to people, but as a community on the margins that is seeking the kingdom of God, that is seeking shalom, that people may just simply stumble over. I think what we're going to find increasingly is that people encounter the good news through the church getting involved in social transformation. That's, it seems to me, where we're going to find those sorts of connections. I think also there's the sense that in Christendom the church felt it had lots to offer, that it was the great benefactor, and that people came to church in order to get certain benefits. Again, I think we need to move beyond that. If we see the church instead as a revolutionary movement, if we see the church as a people who are looking to be involved with God in the transformation of the whole of creation, then it's not so much about what you can offer people, it's more about what you might invite them to participate in. And it seems to me that particularly for the younger generation, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a call to be involved in something transformational. It's more about what they can give than what they can receive. So I think there is a mindset shift that's needed within many of our churches that still seem to me to be operating on the old basis of trying to meet people's needs. I think more often now the church needs to be involved in working in partnership with others who themselves are looking to meet the needs of others. That's a big shift in our way of thinking about the role of the church in society.
So what would you say the Anabaptist tradition has to offer at this juncture in the church? You're a Baptist, and yet you write the book of what the Anabaptists, or the Naked Anabaptists, which has captured a great deal of interest. What draws you to Anabaptist thinking or nature of the church?
I first encountered the Anabaptist tradition as a young church planter back in the 1980s. And I did so because I was looking for resources to help me think about the role of the church within a poor urban community. I was a church planter in part of East London, faced with all sorts of issues of poverty, of racial tension, of homelessness, deprivation, and really wanted to know what is the good news in this context, and began reading around more widely than I had previously, encountered Mennonite writings, Anabaptist writings, and there were a number of things that really registered with me. One of those, I think, was the emphasis on discipleship, that church is not simply about attending meetings. It is about whole life discipleship. It is about following Jesus in all aspects of our humanity. The emphasis on hospitality, on being a community of invitation. Food, it seemed to me, was really important within the Anabaptist tradition. And I have, over the years, been increasingly convinced that something happens when you meet around the table that doesn't happen when you sit in pews in churches. It builds community. It levels hierarchy. It enables conversation at depth. Now, I don't know whether that's a legitimate way of drawing on the Anabaptist tradition, but it was the Anabaptist tradition that alerted me to that reality. The emphasis on peace, the peace tradition. We don't have a strong peace tradition in the UK. We have the Quakers, and their witness has been important, but they're a fairly small community here. And so to be connected to a broader peace church tradition in a situation of significant violence and conflict was really quite important. What does it mean to be part of a reconciling community? And I guess above all, the emphasis on the person of Jesus himself. That may seem very obvious, but growing up in an evangelical church where the emphasis was very much more on doctrine and perhaps on the epistles rather than the gospels, the Anabaptist tradition reconnected me with the story of Jesus himself, his life, his teaching, his miracles, his engagements with people. I guess my feeling is in a post-Christendom world, it is Jesus rather than the church that is going to be the main attraction. It seems, in our context anyway, that while people have a fairly low view of the church, for understandable reasons given our history, there is still a fascination with the person of Jesus. And so for the church to understand itself as a community of those who follow this strange and challenging prophet, that seems to me to be quite important.
Stuart, you're very encouraging. Thank you. And I thank you for talking with us today. For your discussion today, there are basically two questions. What is the church? How would you describe it? And secondly, what does the church have to offer? If someone asks you, why should I come to your church? Or why should the church go to the community? What would you say? I wish you well.